This is a very quick tutorial on how to find papers with data in them. I'm using PLOS ONE, but this approach can work for other public domain or even purchased journal subscriptions. I'm using PLOS ONE because you don't need to be VPN'd into Juniata to do this. So let's say I was interested in venomous snakes. I could put in venomous snakes, right? And I do a search on that, and it's going to spin for a minute. And so you're going to see a ton of stuff on gene expression and that sort of stuff because nobody can actually challenge your results. It's an absolute complete crapshoot. No, I'm being mean. It's just a lot easier to generate data, to generate papers on gene expression, but we didn't do a lot of that. So, so let's look at the synthetic derivatives here. So I'm going to click on that and see if this gave me some data that I could play with. It's got some pretty pictures. There should be supporting information. And I go down to the supporting information. And sure enough, there's some data there for all of the figures. All right. And it tells me that I could download an Excel file for that. Dataset 1 here to get that information, and I say I like that, so I'm going to download my data set. And open it up. And it has a lot of figures here for the various analyses. This would be one that's pretty good for looking at retesting a hypothesis. You might be able to match these to each other, match the different figures to each other to put together a more complete data set. All right, so I'm going to go back to that worked pretty well without having to add the additional search term. I'm going to go back to the PLOS ONE here and do another search. And this time I'm going to do venomous snakes. And I'm going to add the term XLSX, which means it's going to give me XL data sets. All right, I could put in R data or other things like that if I wanted things that I knew were specifically R data set. Okay, it's spinning for a minute. Okay, so here's a snake bite identification one. That looks a little less like I'd have to do a ton of work to figure out what the variables meant. And all right, and you probably want to read the paper first before, but we're going to go down to supporting information. And there's a ton of XLS things here. So like I said, it would be good to read it. And I'm behavior and ecology. It's the one I'm going to download. This one seems like it might just be a bunch of journal articles, but we're going to see. And it is. All right, so this is a meta-analysis, but here are in fact some data that go with that, and you could do some analysis of this based on things that we do in the class that are more for categorical data. This one So you could do very quickly something on whether they're diurnal or nocturnal or what have you. And there are foraging strategies. So I'm just going to do that just to show you how quickly. Have to hit my enable editing. All right, and I'm going to insert a pivot table. And I'm going to do diurnal versus foraging and drop foraging ref into the values here. And so is there any relationship between foraging strategies? We're going to get rid of the 1NA here. We'll drop down and take that away just to remind you that we do some of these things. And we might get rid of the unknown and the NA. So there we go. We pretty quickly get to, does it look like there's any difference between active and passive? Passive looks like, right, they're far, far more likely to be nocturnal or passive. Does that make sense? Here you can see that. So that's a testable hypothesis. We could actually test that hypothesis. I'm not going to do it right here because this was about getting data.